The story of the Von Erichs is not one I was at all familiar with. After seeing the trailer for The Iron Claw, I was really intrigued, not to mention that it's an A24 film, so of course, they sold me. A24 always puts out the best trailers. Whether or not the movie turns out to be good, that's a completely different story. Most of the time it does, but did this one? Let's talk about it. The Iron Claw is cut from a certain cloth of films that I missed. Movies like Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, films that are just very long dramas. This movie takes its time to tell its story of the Von Erichs, a family of wrestlers who are real life figures. Their father, the main driving force of the drama in this movie, was trying to live vicariously through his sons. And because of this, he drove each and every one of his sons to damage themselves. Each one of them ended up in some tragic situation that was brought on by trying to make their dad proud. The father, portrayed by Holt McElhaney, who typically plays the bad dad, bad cop, just corrupt guy, does it again in this movie, and he does it really well. The father is not like a despicable human being in terms of physically abusing his sons or anything of that nature, or at least that's not how it was portrayed in this movie. There was a big, strong arming of his children who were physically stronger than him, and it wasn't helped that there was no buffer for the children. They would often try to go to their mother for a soft place to land, let's say, and she was cold towards them as well.
Dad's too tough on us. You gotta say something.
Baby, that's what your brothers are for.
The coldness came from experiencing loss and came from experiencing the marriage that she had with Fitz Von Erich. Just watching this movie, my experience was, it was heartbreaking because you're watching these kids, these big kids, big diesel kids who are being trained to be men, right? To be real men who don't cry, don't show any kind of pain. Anytime that something happened, whether a sibling died, they weren't allowed to cry. They had to take their sunglasses off. They couldn't hide behind anything. They had to stand there, not cry, not show emotion. And that was hard to watch because I grew up in a situation where it was, difficult. I mean, if you grew up in a lot of households with parents, like, you hear stop crying before I give you something to cry about, right? And that's usually when you're receiving like discipline or a beating or something like that. And there's an emotional abuse and emotional damage there that, it's hard to get over. You got to go to therapy for that type of stuff. So back to this movie, and I just talked about myself. But this movie is really engaging, and honestly, man, I wanted it to end. As much as I was enjoying the craftsmanship of the film and the acting performances and the storytelling was so good, there came a point in this true story where tragedy happened back to back. I was afraid of what was going to happen to Zac Efron's character, Kevin Von Erich, and I was afraid of what was going to happen to Carrie, Jeremy Allen White's character. I'm not going to spoil it at all because to me, I came into the story blind. I know it's history and people have a certain thing about, well, if it's history, you can't really spoil it. I call BS because if I don't know the story, then it can be spoiled. I don't understand that mindset, but that's a subject for another day. It's a tough watch. However, it's not a tough watch because it's a bad movie. To me, this is the best movie I've seen this year. And that's tough because I've seen Across the Spider-Verse, which I've held in high regard. I just saw The Holdovers, which is another movie that I love. But in terms of acting, directing, and everything else, this to me is the best movie I've seen this year. And I haven't seen everything this year, so maybe something else will come along where I'll catch up with something and I'll be like, oh, you know what? That's a better movie. But this is definitely one of those movies where I gotta just put it at the top. I have it number one in my Letterboxd list, and I know I'm going to be making a top 10 video later on before the year ends, hopefully. I want to talk about Zac Efron. Besides the physical transformation, he has a quiet pain about him in this movie that is, man, I'm fighting back tears, like just thinking about all the stuff that he went through. But yeah, he has a quiet pain about him, and it comes to a point where he can't express verbally how he feels to his wife, to anyone. And the final scene, which I will not spoil, was so impactful for me that I started crying. This is like the second of 3 times I've cried watching a movie during this year, or actually I mean this week. I watched The Holdovers, had me in tears. I watched this movie, The Iron Claw, also had me in tears. And I watched Wonka tonight, and at the end of the movie, tears were flowing. I don't know, maybe it's just an emotional time of the year for me. But What I do want to emphasize is I think Zac Efron deserves an Oscar nomination. I think that this movie, just moving into the direction of it, deserves a Best Picture nomination as well as a Best Director nomination. Sean Durkin, who wrote and directed this film, adapted the Von Erich's life into this screenplay, did a masterful job at it. There were times during this movie where things were transpiring and I literally gasped because of the reveal of the results of a tragic incident, and I can't say that I've done that throughout this year. And it was just painful to watch. But like I said, great filmmaking. He did such a good job portraying this family. So yeah, let's go into my rating for it. So I'm going to give The Iron Claw 5 stars. It's a deeply emotional movie. It's well directed, well acted. I need awards nominations given to this movie across the board. I highly recommend that you see it, but brace yourself because it is a lot of heavy subject matter. And yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. If you guys have seen this movie, what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.